Captain, we have them. We've established Transporter Lock, the Star Trek Discovery podcast. Join Ken and Sabriel each week as they explore strange new episodes, seek out new plots and new characters, and boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
Hello and welcome to Transporter Lock episode number 88 for Sunday, December 26th, 2021. I'm your co-host, Chief Engineer Ken Gagney.
And I am Captain Sabriel Maston. And I know we're about to start really getting into this really big, episode talking about things, but I want to stop the action for a moment and just give a little bit of backstory at a moment that's probably feels a little weird. But, it happened last week and it happened this week, so I thought maybe it's time for I do it too. And I introduced myself because, it's common. And when I was little, I had this incident where my parents introduced me, but I was like, I want to introduce myself, and I realized it was very important that I introduce myself. So that's why I introduced myself at the beginning of this episode.
And now we know so much more about you, Sabriel,
Yes.
and it's all relevant to what we're about to talk about.
I know. So thank you for letting me have that moment.
You're quite welcome. I mean, what other opportunity do we have to get to know you?
I know, especially
right?
when the ship's blowing up or we're all about to die.
Right, so when those moments arise, you have to take them. Oh gosh.
So we're here to talk about stormy weather.
Yeah, Season 4, Episode 6, Stormy Weather. This is Discovery, and let me say right off the bat, this is my third favorite episode of the season.
Wow.
So of the last 4 episodes, it's my favorite. So I think this is a good thing. Because
so it's like your favorite, but not favorite.
Well, as I've commented, I felt like the show took a serious dip in quality after the first 2 excellent episodes. And they've been trying to get back up to that level ever since. This week, I feel like they kind of did that. Maybe because there was a little bit more action, and I felt like the blending of action and narrative is still there. It's a little more ham-fisted now. Maybe because we're more aware of it.
I think so.
But I still like that they're doing both of those things.
Yes. I'm going to slow down just a little bit conversation here because we're probably going to sound a little different this week because we are in my ready room here on the ship.
It's true.
Together.
Normally we're projecting holograms into each other's spaces, but today it is the real physical in-person review.
Yeah, so we're sharing one mic. Hopefully this doesn't sound terrible and that we can do noise cancellation later.
I remember on DS9 when they were experimenting with holographic communication.
Yeah, it was,
on the Defiant.
guy.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And I always felt like, okay, A, they're probably saving some money on the budget by doing this.
Right.
And B, I kept waiting for an episode where they had that little, almost like the Sega Genesis activator. There was a ring that the hologram was in. And I kept waiting for the moment where he stepped out of the ring, and it turned out, he wasn't projecting. He transported through the shields, and he's on the ship right now.
That would have been cool.
And they never did that.
No, actually, people kind of laughed at it back then. I thought it was kind of neat because you could probably get more out of the actors because they're not talking to a green screen wall. And so, but they never really explored it because it probably felt so weird for Star Trek. Because it was weird for Star Trek.
And now they're kind of back to doing that.
They are. They have them actually on the bridge.
Except they have a little bit more interference that it's a hologram.
Right. Because we always have to have that. I was thinking that today, actually, with this episode, Stormy Weather. When someone is talking who's not on... Like, if the camera's on the bridge, but someone is engineering talking to someone on a comm badge, they always have the radio static noise so you know that they're, away. I just found it interesting. That way you know that... It's one of those tricks of TV and just filming where you know the person's not in the scene, but they're in the scene by having that radio noise. Mm-hmm. But by 1,000 whatever years from now, I'm sure it would be lossless audio, everything like that. But
well, it was kind of like in the episode The Examples when Reese showed up with his backstory about the hurricane. I thought that was actually him there because the fidelity was so good.
I blinked for a minute and I think, I didn't realize he got here. And then the next when I rewatch, I realized he just hailed him. Right.
I didn't know that they could do a holographic projection when they weren't even on the bridge.
Yeah.
So I wonder where the projection was coming from.
There's a lot of science fiction technology we don't understand in Star Trek, and so
And I have some gripes about the technology in this episode, but
let's get started.
Yeah, I don't need to get ahead of myself.
So this episode was directed by someone we might have heard before called Jonathan Frakes.
Oh yeah, I think he did. Wasn't that movie The Thunderbirds with the puppets?
Yep. That's what he's most known for.
And Clock Stoppers. Yeah. I like his work.
This is his 23rd episode of Star Trek.
Only 23rd?
I thought, actually, I didn't think it was that much. On Ready Room this week, they show like a few second clips of all his episodes of Star Trek.
Including Sub Rosa?
Including Sub Rosa. And so Jonathan Frakes, who was Commander Will Riker, if you don't know, and yeah, he went to directing on the Ready Room. He actually says he likes being a director more than actor.
I've probably told this story before, but I met him at a Super Mega Fest in Framingham, Massachusetts, and I told him that he directed my favorite Star Trek movie, First Contact.
Oh, no.
And he said, well, I had a great script and a great crew to work with.
Mm-hmm. That sounds as humble as he does in this. Yeah. In the Ready Room this week, too.
Yeah, that is his way. It's acknowledging that all the credit doesn't belong to him, and, he may be talented, but it's not about him.
Yeah.
So
let's talk more about Ready Room later on.
Okay, that's something that I never watch, and you always do.
Yeah, I started to do that. Well, also, this week was written by... I said I was going to try to look at people who are writing it behind the scenes to try to get more, maybe insight into things, and this one was written by Ann Kofel-Saunders and Brandon Schultz. Ann Kofel-Saunders wrote 3 episodes of Discovery already. Scavengers last season, where Michael and Giorgio rescue Book from the Emerald Chain Salvage Yard. Did Su'Kal, where they discovered Su'Kal on that hologram dilithium planet, where Saru looked human. And then also did Anomaly this season, where the second episode.
That's right. The most generic of all the episode titles.
Right, and actually, if you look at Anomaly Discovery, because it apparently was used already in the past, I've forgotten. And she also worked on Smallville, The Boys, and one of my favorite Battlestar Galactica episodes, which you haven't seen, so I'm not going to do too much of a spoiler, but we get Pegasus was the episode where we get to see Ensign Michelle Forbes.
Oh, on TNG.
Same actress went on Battlestar Galactica.
Okay, I knew she was on Battlestar Galactica. I thought you were talking about the USS Pegasus, which had the cloaking device.
Yeah, no.
Because isn't that also the episode that tied into the final episode of Enterprise?
Yep.
But that's not what you're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
The Battlestar Galactica episode Pegasus, where if fans of Pegasus or Galactica know what that episode is. I don't want to do too much spoilers because Ken has not seen it, and I think Ken is going to watch.
We were just talking last night about how it's a show that I saw the first season and a half 10 years ago, actually 11 years ago now, and haven't seen it since. But I really want to at some point.
Strongly suggested. So, back to Stormy Weather.
Yes.
What should we start with?
Well, let's see. I didn't take as copious notes, partly because you and I watched this episode together.
I know, it's been since Picard.
Yeah.
I watched another episode.
This may be only the second ever episode of Discovery we've watched together, and so I wasn't taking notes because I felt like that would be rude.
I didn't. Well, I did all my note taking in the second one.
That's right. You rewatched the episodes, which is great because at least one of us was paying attention.
Yeah.
But let's see. Usually there are 3 plots in each episode. So this episode had the subspace rift that they went into, and I think all of the subplots were really in service of that. This one is very closely tied together. There was no little B story. There were stories that were subplots of the main story. Right.
In this week. And so, The Void.
Well, speaking of The Void, this episode reminded me of at least 2 other episodes of Star Trek. I feel like there was a third, and I forget what it was. But most obviously, Star Trek Voyager Season 7, Episode 14, The Void. Where Voyager is stuck in I don't remember what the scientific explanation was, but like a subspace rift with no stars and just other ships. And it also reminded me of TNG, Season 4, Episode 5, Remember Me, where Beverly Crusher is stuck in a warp bubble that is slowly collapsing. Because in this episode, it seems like the edge, the barrier of whatever this rift is closing in on them and is going to envelop them, even if they can't see it. So I feel like they could have asked Zora, what is the nature of the universe? And she would have said, the universe is a sphere 1,000 meters wide.
It was funny. At the beginning of this episode, Saru makes callbacks to Voyager and one of the Enterprises.
That's right.
Traveling to rifts. And, rewatching that, it felt weird, only because, Saru makes these callbacks to the previous Star Treks, which, for them, would have made no sense because it was hundreds of years ago in the past now. It was totally fan service moments.
But also remember Season 3, Episode 5 of Discovery when they finally arrived back at Earth. Or rather, not Earth, but Federation headquarters. there's the Voyager J.
Yeah, and so like it could have been like, did the Voyager J do this? Like, it was totally meant to be fan service for us.
Yeah,
but none of this crew would have any meaning to those names of Enterprise and Voyager.
It just happened to be the ships that they've done shows about. Uh-huh. It could have been the USS Achilles,
right, or anything that's happened in the last 900 years,
right? And same thing with the Enterprise. Like I think Captain Archer, when he went to the future, saw the Enterprise J, and even Captain Picard said there are still a lot of letters left in the alphabet.
The Void. I thought the Void was really cool. As a plot device, you're on a ship alone in uncharted waters. I mean, that's Star Trek in a nutshell, but here, when there's no space, I thought it was really cool. The creepy thing, it was really creepy with the Dot dying and screaming in space, dying. You can hear someone screaming, apparently, when there's no sound.
Because now we know that, originally the Dots were the manifestation of Zora. That's like all we got. At least in that
one episode. It was never really explored.
Yes, I agree. But I think we can assume that the Dots are still manifestations of Zora.
I think they're at least connected to.
Yeah, and now that Zora has feelings, if a part of her dies, she even said when the hulls were being breached, she's like, it's a part of me being sheared off.
Uh-huh.
And we'll get more into that, of course.
Yeah, but the screaming scene, that was creepy. I wasn't sure if I was ready for it the second time. I thought about skipping that for a minute, but I watched anyway.
Let me back up and say, I feel it was irresponsible of them to go into the rift in the first place. We didn't see them send any probes in.
Right?
Let's just send a ship manned with actual people into this rift. I
think I mentioned that when we were watching live. Like, no one ever uses probes anymore unless it's like for some dramatic effect.
Right.
It's like that's a problem with Star Trek in general. They just never use the probes that they have unless it's a plot device.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's missing. Like, okay, there's our plot device. Let's go in and look for it.
Right. Well, I guess you can't send another probe because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result.
The first castle burned down and sank into the swamp. Then we built another one on top of that, and that burned down and sank into the swamp. And then...
So let's just do it a third time. Well, that actually demonstrates what you just said, how we as a society are building places in environmentally unsound locations. Like, oh, how come we keep getting all these hurricanes that tear down all our buildings? Let's put more buildings right in the path of the hurricane.
I had a geology teacher in college who laughed at the thought of that New Orleans exists where it does.
Right.
Because he's like, if humans had longer lives and actually thought about things long term, no one would build there. Right.
That's an excellent and much better example of what I was trying to say.
He just laughed so hard. I'm like, you know what? He's not wrong.
No.
But anyway, when that Dot died, I had more connection to that Dot dying than Ariam's death in season 2.
Really?
That Ariam in season 2 had no connection for me at all.
But we had seen Ariam before, and granted, we didn't get her backstory until that episode.
Right. If they could have seeded that at all in season 2 before that episode, it would have been way different.
But they didn't seed anything about this Dot. Like, why did you care about the Dot?
Because we heard it screaming.
Oh.
And they gave it a face.
Okay. Ariam had a face?
She did, but she wasn't screaming in the void.
And she actually wasn't it Commander Nan? Was that her name?
Yeah,
like she's the one who punched the button. Mm-hmm. Like she had her breathing apparatus ripped off, but she came to long enough to push the button to eject the airlock and kill Ariam. Like that was dramatic.
It was dramatic, but it didn't have the emotional just punch because we didn't have any. Ariam didn't matter until that episode, and it sucked. I wish they would have pushed that forward. So basically, I just felt more in the moment.
Well, I think part of it is that Ariam didn't really die. She came back as Commander Nielsen.
Yeah. There's also that.
So for those who didn't get the memo, the actor who played Ariam in season 1 came back in season 2 as Commander Nielsen. Mm-hmm. And they had somebody else play Ariam in season 2, and that's the actor who is not here anymore because the character died.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they never got rid of her. She got to keep her job.
Right. So the actor who played Ariam in season 1 has been in every season of Star Trek before and after Ariam's death. Anyway, talk about more about the Void.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
yes,
the Void. Okay, they try to jump out.
The mushroom spore jump?
Yep, they tried the mushroom spore jump, and that doesn't work, and Book gets electrocuted.
Yeah.
And during the episode, he talks to his father, and gets yelled at by his father, And I had forgotten at the very beginning of the episode, one of the first lines spoken, his book mentions his dad's birthday. Would have been his dad's birthday today.
Yes.
I just totally forgot that.
That's why at the end, his last words to his dad are happy birthday.
Yeah. But zapping his brain was the clue that Discovery needed.
But also, the very first word his father said to him was his true name.
Yeah.
Or rather, his birth name.
His birth name, Terex.
Yes.
And Book even says that's not my name anymore. I'm like, oh, his dad. First thing his dad does, I know this very well, is dad naming you.
we had 3 different characters in this episode who all made a point of saying that they chose their name. Mm-hmm. We have Book, we have Zora, and we have Gray. I didn't know that Gray had chosen his name before.
Yeah, it didn't really come up.
Yeah.
Just didn't really have a reason to. And then, but yeah, the name you choose for yourself can be very important. I think, maybe it's not best to let kids choose their name, because who knows if they would choose, like, Purple Pink Elephant. But, having a point where you have your own, being able to choose your name is, I think, very important to some people.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I mean,
absolutely.
I got to do it.
I mean, I think whether or not it's your name, choosing your identity is important. And there are a lot of different ways to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to work with a guy named Jack. That was not his name, but everyone called him Jack. He preferred Jack. He liked Jack.
Yep.
And so even if you can't do it legally because it's a big process, go ahead by a different name if one speaks to you more.
Did you know that Jackie Chan, Jackie is not his name?
You know, I did not know that because I never thought about it either. But it makes sense.
If I recall what I read his autobiography about 15 years ago. And if I recall correctly, he was working on a construction site, and everybody just called him Jackie. And he was like, okay, let's go with that. And so that became his name. And, I just pulled up his Wikipedia page. He was born Chan Kong Sang. And then it also says his legal name is Datuk Fang Shai Long. And he's known professionally as Jackie Chan. So there we go.
Today I learned.
Yes.
So Book was working through a lot of emotions with his dad, even if his dad wasn't there. Mm-hmm. Which I don't think it was. I think it was just his hallucinations, as they thought it was in the episode, too.
I agree, but I wonder if his dad was that much of a jerk in life.
At least that's what you perceive as a parent, of the person. He might have been. Or at least this is what Book perceived, and we may never know. If it's just that.
You know what? I did not expect that interaction to go the way it did. I thought that his father, or the appearance of his father, the apparition, was going to be planting seeds of doubt in Book's mind. Because I've been worried all season, ever since Qui-Gon was destroyed, about how Book's and Burnham's relationship would have developed.
And it sounds... This episode shows it just keeps getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah. Like, I thought it was going to get weaker and weaker. I thought Book was going to come out of that hallucination much more suspicious of Burnham about how he's doing whatever she tells him to, and how he is going to have to assert his independence and break away from her. But he just, stepped up to his dad and said, "This is a strength I have. I trust her and I love her." And then he went to her and he said that.
Under the assumption that it was just a hallucination of his own creation. I mean, his dad would be the manifestation of all his own self-doubts. And he's convincing himself of what he needs to get through. So that feels like more what that role was. He does have all these doubts. He was feeling like Michael would just ignore him.
You know what? Maybe I need to rewatch that episode, because that is a very good point. I kept perceiving his dad as these energy particles, when actually, you're right, it's his own subconscious. It's kind of like how in our dreams, we are every character in our dreams. Not like, in our dreams, we usually think like, oh, this is me, and I'm interacting with all these other people. But those other people are you, because they're all coming from the same place, which is your own head, which is weird. Jerk brains too sometimes. Honestly.
If I could never have another tornado dream nightmare again, I would be very happy.
I'm sorry. So yeah, I love how Book came through this, and they found, I hope I'm not jumping out of your order, but when they examined the particles in his head, they confirmed your theory, Sabriel, from Season 4, Episode 1.
It was an extragalactic threat.
It's an intergalactic threat.
Extra.
That's right. That's right. It comes from outside the galaxy. It is extragalactic.
Yeah. I had a hypothesis of if it's someone we know who it could be, like the Andromedans. Shar brought up maybe whoever sent Voyager or V'ger back to Earth, maybe. Whoever sent the whale probe. Star Trek Discovery, we're finding out they love to touch back on things from the past. Like, there's all this universe building of mystery that could go unanswered, but we can also touch on it if we want. And so those are some hypotheses if it's someone we know. Otherwise, it's some alien species C10.
When you say the Andromedans, is it the same as the Kelvins?
I think they were two separate, but now, as we're questioning it, I've forgotten, so...
Because I don't remember who the Andromedans might be.
The Andromedans, I thought, were the ones who did... No, the Kelvins were the ones who did the salt. Turning people to salt.
That's what you told me earlier.
Yep. No, you're right. There's so much going on up there. Sometimes I mix things up, but...
Well, when you have a brain full of 800 episodes of Star Trek...
It's easy to remember everything in 1 week, and then the next week is what? What are you talking about?
Right.
But yeah, extragalactic threat. So I'm excited to see what that is. I know we're going to explore some of that soon. Next episode is a cliffhanger. Well, I don't know if it's a cliffhanger, but it's a mid-season break. So expect a cliffhanger.
Right. So after season 7, Discovery goes on hiatus and Prodigy comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But let's talk more about the intergalactic threat. Extragalactic threat.
Yes.
Dang it.
Mm-hmm.
I took Greek. I should know my roots.
Intergalactic, planetary, intergalactic.
What song is that?
Weird Al, of course.
Oh.
No, it's not.
Wait, is it?
Weird Al did a polka version of it.
Oh, God.
It was Beastie Boys, I think.
I don't know anything. Okay. So, it sounds to me from this episode that Starfleet, the Federation, whatever, already has some knowledge of a galactic barrier. And we haven't really seen that before, have we?
Yes, we have. On TOS, they went to the galactic barrier because that's what you could do back then before they had an established, technology level. Enterprise D went beyond the galactic barrier once. Where no man has gone before, I think.
Is that the one where Barclay was the ship's computer?
No, it was... Maybe they did it there too, but this was a season 1 episode, I think.
Oh, okay. I know which one you mean.
So we've seen it before. But... And they've probably seen it in the last 900 years.
Huh.
But,
It sounds like they've never gone to the edge of it in an episode, though.
Yeah, they either went to the edge, or I think they did in that TOS episode, but the galactic barrier has been basically like, we don't need to explore that because we're stuck in our part of space. Mm-hmm. And I think I was hypothesizing with you or my friend Shar about, I think they're setting up, so future seasons of Discovery, we're going to go to new galaxies.
But there's so much in our own galaxy.
I think they've explored most of our galaxy in this timeline now, in the last 900 years. Because we've seen maps of the Delta Quadrant planets we've known and things like that. I think they're just alluding to it. And so I think now, all of a sudden, because we know other ships are going to get spore drive.
But they still haven't solved the pilot problem of the new spore drive.
But they're working on. I think that's what they're leading into. All season, they keep hinting at it and talking about it in the background. And I think they're hinting at, in the future, we're going to get more extragalactic travel.
But don't you need to know where you're going to warp there? Via the spore drive?
We'll figure that out then. I just think that's where it's kind of heading up to.
I don't know. I'm a little intimidated by that. I feel like there's still a lot to happen back home. Like, I want to know what has happened to the Borg in the last 900 years.
I'm going to keep Mum.
What do you mean you're going to keep Mum?
I'm going to keep Mum.
Why? What? How do you know something I don't?
I'm going to keep Mum.
Is that because you know I hate it when you spoil stuff?
Yes.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to that.
But do I know something or don't I know something?
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
And
we don't know, but there are a lot of stories that we don't know in the Milky Way. But it's Star Trek, so I guess we'll see. Or at least they'll make some more excursions out there, I think. Because we've never been to another galaxy without someone else's help.
Or maybe it'll be like... That is a good point. That is what I was trying to get to earlier. And maybe it'll be like Talos 4, where they go out there and they decide, you know what, this is too dangerous for us. Mm-hmm. Let's never go back there. Nobody's allowed to leave the galaxy ever again. Kind of like when they first met the Borg, and Picard's like, he said to Q, we are scared, we need your help. And he sent him home. Where they're going to go outside the galaxy and they're going to be like, oh crap, we're not ready for this. Maybe in another 100 years we'll come back when humanity has evolved. Or whatever. Anyway. We haven't talked about Zora yet.
Yeah, Zora, main character, is becoming a main character. I mentioned to you that Zora has gotten more character development than a lot of the Bridge crew in 4 seasons. And I love Zora.
Yes. I am a huge fan of Zora as well. I feel like every Star Trek series has a character who is learning what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
Spock, Data, Odo, the holographic Doctor, and Seven of Nine,
Mm-hmm.
T'Pol, and now we have Zora. Because we haven't really had anybody much like that in this series. I wouldn't say Saru has been trying to be more human. So now we got Zora. And I wondered, would they have been able to escape the void this episode if they had had a quote-unquote regular computer? Like, was Zora a strength in this episode? Or was she a weakness? Because she had to overcome her own distractibility and lack of confidence in order to escape the void. If they had a computer with no personality, could they have done that more easily?
Yeah, possibly. Because we don't know, but that very seems plausible. Very much seems plausible to me.
Because that seems to me like they might go back to Federation HQ and give their report, and HQ will say, this computer is a liability and needs to be purged of its personality.
I don't think that would happen at all.
No, I agree with you because their mission is to seek out new life. Well, there it is, sitting in a chair waiting. Measure of a Zora. But nonetheless, it doesn't change the fact that she may have been a liability in this one case.
But, I mean, any crew member could be a liability, especially Bridge crew.
But how many... Okay, that's true.
You just gotta trust each other. That's what being a crew in Star Trek is all about. Let me get my Starfleet captain.
But how often do you see Bridge crew freeze up because they're afraid?
It's something that Star Trek hasn't explored much, but The Expanse has.
Which is another show I've not seen.
Yeah.
Did you know that it's based on a role-playing game?
Yes, I did, because I was the one who was there while you learned that.
I had no idea.
They will show people having their moments personally, but it doesn't always... I'm sure in these 800 some episodes, of Star Trek, there's been a moment that I'm not thinking of at the moment where someone stops and can't do it. But someone usually will push them over so they can do it.
I mean, there were certainly times Barclay was afraid of stuff, like he was afraid of transporters.
Wasn't really Bridge crew.
True. He was in surprisingly few episodes.
I know, right? It feels like he was such a bigger part.
Right. I mean, he even made it into First Contact.
And Voyager.
Recurringly. Oh, well.
But, like a lot of the Bridge, yeah. I mean, like, Data having a fit. Data was having a crying, or like a fit,
Oh, yeah, in Generations.
Yeah.
He couldn't stop laughing.
But you're right, they usually show within the same episode the same person is allowed time to overcome it and not in the heat of the moment.
Which is what Zora did, eventually.
And so basically the same, I guess. But I do like it. Here Zora picked her own name. In various languages, her name means dawn or new day. Gray mentioned that he picked his name here. Cool scene where Gray is... I don't know, hypothesis for the season around Gray. But, get that in a second here. Gray helped Zora work through things, calm her down. Get her to slow down so she can focus on things, because all the sensors were overloading her. She was getting overloaded with all the information that she doesn't have or does have on the ship. She was becoming very self-aware of every single little problem, and hyper-focusing on things. And Gray helped talk her down. Gray is showing to be very good at being perceptive of people's feelings and talking with them. See where I'm going with this? Where his new role and Discovery might be in the future? No? Culber is working through some things. He's been working as a psychiatrist. And so I wonder if Gray is going to pick up on some of that. At least maybe while Culber is on vacation, as he was told to go on break. So I wonder... At some level, I wonder if Gray is going to help. Maybe not on a professional level, but maybe step into some of those shoes to some degree.
Well, Culber hasn't taken a break yet.
Mm-hmm.
There was an earlier episode in this season where Susan Arndt tweeted the fact that there were a bunch of high-ranking individuals presidents, admirals, captains, all sitting at a table, trying to decide what to do next. And it was all women except for Admiral Vance.
Mm-hmm.
And that gender balance really struck her. And ever since she said that, I've started paying more attention. Like you and I have commented before, like, oh, there are times where I think season 2, the only white man on the bridge was Captain, what's his name?
You mean Pike?
Pike, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Captain Pike. And so in this episode in particular, there was a scene in sickbay where it was Dr. Culber, Dr. Pollard, Book, and Burnham. And I was like, that's 4 people of color.
Mm-hmm. All in one scene.
Yeah. And that was great. And I guess if I had been more perceptive, maybe it wouldn't have struck out to me, actually, because there are probably a lot of scenes like that in Discovery. But I really like that we have all these people on this ship. And they actually gave Dr. Pollard 2 different scenes.
She got to have her own drama scene. Which was kind of neat to see. She doesn't get that very often. I wonder why they chose her for this scene.
Well, I have 2 questions about that.
But
2 questions about that scene. One of them is exactly what you just asked, which was, oh, Dr. Pollard is near there. Let's get her eyes on the scene. And she rounds the corner and sees that there are a lot of crewmen already working on this problem. Why didn't they ask any of them?
They were looking for an officer, I guess. I don't know. Because that did feel weird to me too.
They can't trust the observations of low-ranking individuals.
I mean, I don't know. One person couldn't even take the opportunity while being blasted out to space to beam himself back.
That was my second question. Like, they have these transporters that most of the time, like in this episode when they went to the pattern buffer, you saw them tapping their comm badges. Most of the time, they don't even do that. They just apparently think about where they want to go. We don't see them inputting coordinates or talking to the computer. They just go there somehow. And this time he was instead physically running to get somewhere, got blocked by a force field. Not only did he not beam himself out, but I feel like Zora could beam anybody she wants to.
Maybe Zora was having issues. She was kind of having a moment at that point there too. But anyone else could have. Or we've seen on multiple Star Trek C4 or even other shows where you're in space you get a few seconds, a few moments where you're okay for a little bit, maybe hurting when you come back, but can pull you out. And that guy even held on to the bulkhead I was watching before he got pulled out further yet.
Ouch.
And it's like, someone else had a moment to react and they didn't do it. Well, maybe because sensors were being overloaded, they couldn't get him.
But if he had even an ounce of Packlet blood in him, he could have survived the fridges of outer space. But
yeah, that just did feel weird based on the technology that they've given us, the toys that they play with now. He probably didn't have to die.
I agree.
But,
it would have been less dramatic, of course, because then Zora had to have guilt over that. And what would she have had guilt over if she had saved everybody?
She could have had guilt about letting it happen still. But, so yeah, that's what we're tying back to. That can help Gray maybe fill in some more role or shoes of helping out, because Gray and Michael help Zora work through the death of someone now. She felt it was her fault. And,
one thing we haven't seen a lot of with Gray is working through the fact that Gray no longer has a symbiont.
Yeah, they haven't had time to sit down and explore, but this is kind of touching on that. The game they played, which I found on Ready Room, they actually invented at least semi-real rules for this game that the crew did when they were the production crew actually made a game based on.
And it was new for this episode, right? Cool.
But that whole game was meant for Trill to work on integration back in their body, and so it's there, but it's not like the focus of the episode. Maybe we'll get more of that soon.
Yeah, because Gray not only has a new body, but I mean, I that was the reason given in this episode to play that game, to help Gray integrate with the body that has been created, and now that seems related to but separate from the loss of the symbionts.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Zora, we got Zora and Gray bonding over a board game, which is cool.
and then Gray running up to the bridge to say, I need to tell Burnham that Zora can have external sensors when Zora's focused.
I would love that, because all I could think of was Picard would say, what are you doing on my bridge, kid?
Well, I had 2 questions about that. One was, yes, why not just use the comm badge? And second of all, Zora could report that herself.
Actually, we kind of stated earlier, because Gray was like, Zora, you need to tell her.
And Zora says, I don't have enough information yet.
And she was locking up.
That's...
Zora was having kind of an anxiety attack about it, in a sense, because not sure what to do. I don't have enough information, and having a few friends who go through similar feelings sometimes of like hyper focusing on that and just helping them like focus on something so they can tell me what they need or get what they're trying to say. Gray was that role here, and Gray helped facilitate that in person.
You know, I said at the beginning of this podcast that I felt like there was a third episode of Star Trek this reminded me of, and I forgot which one it was. I just remembered it was the one where there was a benzite on TNG, and he found something on the hull and did not report it until he had all the information.
See?
And Zora was doing the exact same thing. Now, when I make these callbacks to say, oh, this is just like Voyager The Void, or this is just like TNG Remember Me, that's not a criticism. Like, after 800 episodes of Star Trek, it's inevitable that some things will come back up. And also, there are really only so many plot devices that exist in narration to begin with. Like, I think you can pretty much boil it down to two things. You go on a journey, or a stranger comes to town. And that's one of two things. So, what I admire about Discovery is that regardless of what elements are in there that are similar to another Star Trek episode, or are original to itself, if anything, it's the synthesis that is new. You know, they're taking elements from The Void, and elements from Remember Me, and elements from the Benzites, and making it into something we haven't seen before. You know, I had a friend, Tony, who wanted to launch a podcast. And he felt that the only way to do that was to first not listen to any other podcasts.
Oh no.
Because he
didn't want to.
He felt it would subconsciously influence him, and he would steal all these ideas when he just wanted to make it wholly his own. And say, no, I never stole that from somebody else. I thought of it myself. And I thought, like, Tony, you're going to make all the same mistakes that have already been made. You should let other people make the mistakes so you can learn from them and improve on them. Listen to the podcast, find out what you don't like, and fix it when you do your own. And so I hope that the people who are writing Discovery, especially Jonathan Frakes, not that he wrote it, he directed it, that they've seen all the Star Treks you and I have seen, Bri. And I think that's a good thing, because it's not like they're saying, oh, we have a writer's strike, let's just rehash these 6 elements. We're going to take all these things and put them into something new and nobody will ever recognize it. No, I think it's cool, because even if they're not doing it on purpose, I think you and I have previously spoken about, it was on Polygamer just last week, how if you are in a creative field, you should spend 20% of your time consuming content. Because you need to synthesize it and be inspired by it.
Yeah, what is everyone else doing? I mean, how many times in Dungeons and Dragons can I ham-fist my way to making a dungeon? Like, hey, you need to go into a dungeon to do a thing. Oh, hey, you need to go into a dungeon and do a thing. I mean, I do that every campaign or some kind of dungeon, every week.
Yeah.
I gotta make up some reason to go in there. And so, yeah, you can still tell stories, even if it's same stuff in the past, as you've seen in the past.
Yeah. It's, you know, written in a different context for a different audience. You know, the people who are watching Star Trek now are very different from who was watching it 55 years ago. I mean, they may be the same individuals in some cases, but they themselves have grown.
Most of us have grown.
Yeah. You know, and there are some people who don't like Discovery because, oh, it's serial, or, oh, it's too diverse. And I was like, well, this is not your Star Trek.
Yeah.
This is our Star Trek.
It's still Star Trek, even the ones you don't like.
Especially the ones you don't like. By the way, at some point I want to talk about what you got up on the screen there.
Yes, we'll talk about the lesbians in a bit. So... if that doesn't get anyone else excited. Zora, I love the moment when Michael says, Zora, please join me in the ready room. Or join us in the ready room. I thought that was so cool, just to treat her like an actual member of the crew. Even though she's always going to be there.
Yeah, she's omnipresent.
But she's like Zora, just treating her like she is a person in existence.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
Well, even at one point, didn't she sort of self-consciously say please to Zora? Yeah, and Saru was like...
The beginning of the episode, yeah. She gets in there and please. And Saru's like, what's going on? And she's like, it's polite.
Well, am I the only one who says thank you to Siri and Alexa?
I have done it too.
It's just the polite thing to do.
And if the robot uprising happens, they'll know
They'll
to kill
remember
me
you.
quickly.
Yeah.
Instead of drawing it out.
Right.
Mhm.
That's the least you can hope for.
Yeah, at least. But I like that. At the very end, the family tree. I thought that was cute that Zora made of the crew.
Oh, yeah.
And then Michael telling her, like, this is different, but it's good. This is special.
Yeah.
About her connection with Zora and the ship's connection to Zora.
And I think both Zora's tree and Burnham's tree both had Tilly on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it sometimes it's hard to remember that she's no longer on the bridge.
I know, right? But then Adira is actually taking Tilly's spot on the bridge.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because at one point Adira said, like, oh, it's my first time on the bridge. Or
First assignment, usually they're there. But not usually an assignment, usually like working as like I almost like it felt like an intern to Tilly. And so now they have actually been assigned here.
Thank you for that clarification because I was trying to figure out how this could be the first when they are on the bridge all the time. Now I get it. Thank you.
No problem. And also Gray sending Adira off to work, getting the hail, like, everyone get to your stations, and Adira's all like nervous, and Adira's like, go, 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 go. It was cute.
And speaking of which, when everybody is being summoned to their stations, we saw some unusual visual transitions.
Those were weird but cool.
I've never seen anything like that in Star Trek before.
The closest we had was when they did the season 2, when they were recapping the original pilot.
Oh, yeah.
And they had the neat transitions talking about last time on this episode of Star Trek that never really existed. Here it's existing. They did kind of funny transitions, too. And they did some neat ones here.
Well, when they did those transitions, I remember you pointing this out on Transporter Lock, they were specifically calling back to the cinematic techniques of the 60s. Mm-hmm. In this episode, I almost felt like they were inspired by the recent Netflix live-action Cowboy Bebop series.
Maybe.
Which, of course, has Sulu in it.
Uh-huh. No.
It does.
It does. I know what you mean.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Emergency break on.
So, but I wonder why they did that.
It did. I liked it. It was neat to see, but also so weird for Star Trek.
Well, that's the thing, is it took me out of the story for a second.
It did both of us. Really, what we were watching, like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah. Our first response wasn't, wow, that's neat. That was our second response. Our first response was, what is happening? And I don't think that's a good response.
I don't know if it's bad either. It's a neutral. It's a response. I guess we'll see if they do that anymore in the future so we can reflect on this.
It exists in the neutral zone of transitions.
Right.
Yeah.
As long as no one steps over it for the moment.
That's right. And in that scene, in the transitions, we saw the gym where Oo and Detmer were working out.
Yes, this is the lesbian scene you were talking about. You asked me...
You're the one who called it that. You were talking about it.
I was, but you asked, like, what's this person tweeting about?
Well, it's just a scene. There was a Twitter thread that pointed out two things, neither of which I was aware of. One was, I would really have to go back and watch the last several episodes with a fine-tooth comb, but they're suggesting that Detmer and Oo have not been on screen together for a while. Kind of like how...
Oh, yeah, because last week it was weird fish person was in Oo's seat.
That's right. Oh, that's a good point. So kind of like how they shot Reno's scene separately. I think due to COVID, Oo and Detmer have not been together for a while.
Maybe.
And so this scene was showing them reunited. And then elsewhere in the Twitter thread, it was shipping them. Which maybe you and I have talked about, but one of the things you said to me on DM recently was, Detmer is clearly gay, you don't know about Oo. Is that right?
Yep.
Now, for those of us who do not have a good sense for these things, I think I know some of what you're going to say, but can you break down your analysis of Detmer for me?
Oh, gosh. I don't know if there's a precise way. It's one of those gaydar things.
That's the word I was trying to avoid using.
I have no problem because I'm very gay. She has this I don't know, this panache, right word? This way she carries herself, very, butch isn't the right word, but she's very got top energy, Ken, if you know much about queer culture. No, she's a pilot. I talked about this before in the past about her pilotness and her...
Yes. I remember that conversation.
And for her to be that, and I think like Brie Larson's Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel.
Oh, okay.
Has that kind of same energy, very gay energy.
Also military. Okay.
And just, I don't know if I can put it into words. And any lesbian I know who's listening to this would like, yep, immediately, yep, Kayla, totally gay.
Okay. I mean, I don't doubt this analysis at all.
Or at least, hopefully, I mean, I would love it if she is. Hopefully it's not queer baiting. Because Star Trek loves, or TV shows love to do that. Media loves to do that. But she totally feels gay to me. Oh, well, might be queer on some level. But I don't know.
So you didn't mention the side shave.
I mean, yeah, she looks like me. It's awesome. I thought that was just a given, so I didn't need to bring it up.
Okay.
No.
All right.
But yeah, they got to have their little scene together. And speaking of Owo.
Yes.
Owo had a little moment where it's like, Saru, I need to go do a thing. And Saru's like, no, you're not going to do a thing. And she's like, ah. And then Saru tells the crew, I know it's tough, but we have to stand together. And that was it. But then when things are going bad, it's like, hold on, I need to stop the action and tell you about my outburst and why I wanted to do that. And it felt just weird. It's like Reese last week, the scene where all of a sudden I'm going to I'm going to tell you all about why I did that thing.
Yeah, my home was destroyed by a hurricane.
And here's like, I had a friend who I don't remember anymore. I watched it twice and I've already forgotten. Because I didn't care, because I was just kind of giggling at the moment and writing notes, but I will figure it out.
Or kind of like that other crewman who he knows all about surfing, and now he also knows about sonar.
Yeah. Sonar makes sense because of communications. I was thinking probably just a very much like a communications dweeb. You know, like I'm big on Star Trek, so I can tell you a lot about Star Trek. He's a geek about radio technology and communications. That's what I was thinking for that one. But for it actually did kind of make sense this episode, especially on rewatch. They didn't know if they were going to come out of the pattern buffer alive, and she wanted to apologize. Like, before I die, I'm sorry. I kind of blew up at you in my way. And so it's actually meant as a moment of, if I die, I don't want to be angry.
Yeah. And
so it actually did kind of fit here, but right when it was happening, we were both laughing like, oh no, they did it again.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about the whole pattern buffer technique?
I was not afraid that they were not going to come back at all. It didn't have any drama for me, but I thought it was a neat way to travel.
I feel like somebody should have thought of this before. I mean, it's the same reason why you separate the saucer, is to get everybody away from a dangerous situation. And in this case, if the ship goes down, then the buffer goes with them. But the biological component or threat is removed, at least. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like this should be in the Starfleet operating handbook. Like, if somebody's about to die, put them in the buffer.
Yeah, it feels like you can prolong them. And maybe that's an ethics thing, too. It's like, we can keep them here. I mean, obviously Scotty was apparently the exception for 75 years in there. Where here it was a couple hours, which is still apparently much longer than normal.
But it's also hundreds of people instead of just one.
Right, and so maybe we hand wave at the danger of this because we don't want people to get lost as energy forever.
Well, what about this? What if somebody is in sick bay and they're dying?
That's what I was thinking. Like, yeah, you can...
and they need to get back to a starbase for treatment. Just put them in the buffer until you get there. It's basically like freezing them.
No, I thought that too. Like, this could work, at least to some degree, but maybe that whole thing of like, we don't know how long you're safe with this pattern buffer. And so maybe you start to degrade and die anyway. After too long. Even after 1,000 years.
I was amused by the idea of Gray, Adira, and Squidface. They were all holding hands when they got beamed in. And I want them to beam out as like some sort of horrific amalgamation. Like, kill me.
Tuvix.
Yeah, I was thinking of that, but on a more horrific scale.
So like Star Trek 1 motion picture.
A little bit, yeah. But even worse.
And then splattering all over the transport.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I thought it was funny that, like, sure, go into the buffer with somebody so you're not alone, but I would be nervous about beaming in while in physical contact with somebody else.
Really?
Yeah.
No one else seems to have a problem with that. But like, yeah, but how does the computer know who's who?
Exactly. Like, what if they think that the you end and the other person begins, instead of at the fingertips, it's actually like at the wrist. Like, oh my god, I now have an extra hand attached to my hand permanently. And now I have no hand.
Or I have 7.
Of 9.
Yeah, that would be interesting too. But yeah, I thought that was a fine resolution. It was cool seeing Discovery, like, having the heat entry type thing of and
Yes.
just being ripped to shreds.
Yes. I did have one more question, though. So, Burnham did not go into the buffer.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, she said to Zora, Zora, you're going to have to be the one to bring them out when it's safe. Do you understand? So if Burnham was not going to be the one to bring her crew out of the buffer, why did she stay on the bridge? Other than just tradition.
She said Captain goes down with her ship. She wanted that to be her legacy if she died.
That doesn't seem practical.
A lot of people don't do things practical.
I thought the way she was going to survive was that Zora was going to put her in the buffer. I thought Zora was basically going to override her because we saw at the end of season 2 when they tried to blow up Discovery when it had all the sphere data that it wouldn't blow up. It would not self-destruct. So Zora has a very strong self-preservation. And I think it's only a matter of time before that extends to her feelings toward the crew as well. And I don't mean that in a malevolent or malicious way, like in Forbin, the Colossus Project. I mean that more in the sense of TNG. Again, when the Enterprise became self-aware, it beamed itself away from a threat before the crew even knew it. Not just to protect itself, but to protect the crew. And I'm curious to see what Zora will do.
That feels like it's gonna... It's okay, I was just checking this. It feels like that's gonna lead to something sometime soon. Zora's just gonna make the decision, and override someone. Or not. Maybe the Star Trek has been pretty good about subverting expectations.
Yeah, I don't know if she'll override, because that really seems like... It seems too close to what Burnham did in the very first episode of the entire show.
That's true. Unless it's a moment like, I've done that too, Zora, and I understand, but we still have to arrest you. No, but I understand. They'll have some moment or Zora wants to and is about to. Michael calms or talks her down.
That's all I got.
I got a few more things.
Let's hear it.
Book and Saru talking at the end about rage
anger.
and anger.
Yeah, that was cool.
Like Saru saying, I struggle with working with the Baul at home, but he gives the advice of don't make it your personality. Basically, you can still feel rage, you can still feel that anger, but don't hard focus on it. Use it.
I liked that Saru said that their rage is justified. And to the point you just made, reminds me of what Mandy Patinkin says about The Princess Bride. How everybody always quotes his character as, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die. But in the actor's opinion, the most important line, he says, is his last line in the movie, which I believe I'm paraphrasing is, I've been in the revenge business so long, I don't know what to do now. When anger becomes your only motivator and so large a part of your personality, eventually you have to let go, and what's left?
Yeah.
And Saru is warning him, don't get into that place in the first place. I thought that was powerful.
Yeah. You don't see people talking about anger in that way, and rage. And we've seen it a lot in the season of Star Trek, talking about just we don't see people talking about their feelings as much. In Star Trek, even in an episode alone, they'll talk about their feelings, but then it's gone out the window the next episode in the past for a lot of characters, or because it's their bottle episode, and they don't have they might have growth, but it's not the same kind of growth we're seeing here, where everyone is kind of helping Book through this over the course of the season in their own ways, and I think it's really cool.
Has there been an episode of Star Trek where one character has their phaser pointed at another, and she wants to kill him, but she gets talked down from it, and somebody says, if you kill him, you'll be just like him?
Oh, that feels like... I can't think of any example. It feels like that's a trope in Star Trek.
I'm not thinking of Star Trek. I'm just thinking, I can think of all these other shows it's happened in. But I'm trying to think specifically in Star Trek. And I'm having a hard time with it.
I can picture Janeway in this role, holding the phaser, or her talking someone down. But I can't picture, an actual scene or moment.
Right?
I feel like it's happened tons of times. Because I know Data shot at Kivas Fajo.
Yeah, but not out of emotion. He just thought it as the only logical way to end his reign of terror.
But no one stopped him, talked him down from it.
Right.
I know this has happened, but I can't think of any instance off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's weird that we can't think of it. Anyway. There was a really good episode of Quantum Leap where that happened.
Yeah.
Where Sam leapt into the body of a murderer. And at the end, the sheriff, whose daughter had been murdered by this guy, has his gun. Like, he's supposed to arrest the criminal that Sam Beckett is.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, he pulls out his gun and he's going to shoot him. And this woman who Sam had been holding hostage steps in between them. And the cop says, he's a murderer. And the woman says, he is, but you're not. You're a daddy who misses his little girl. Be remembered for that, not for this.
It also feels like something's happening in Star Trek.
Right.
Uh-huh.
If our listeners can think of those examples, please write in.
Please. I draw a complete blank.
Well, like we said, 800 episodes, they all get muddled together after a while.
Stamets had some growth too.
He should see a dermatologist.
He should know. He had some character growth here too, because Book was getting ready to fly out into the void, and then they found out, and then he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna go talk to Stamets. I gotta do something." And then Stamets, Book goes down to engineering, and Stamets actually stops to thank Book for coming to help, and then they're talking about jumping out with the spore drive, and Stamets is like, I have to watch the data, because apparently they don't record it. I have to watch it live. But Book is like, I'll do it. And Stamets is like, okay, now is as good a time as any to learn how to delegate.
I love that line. Yeah. I really like Stamets in this episode.
Yeah, he's starting to really he worked with Angry Science Guy last episode, or recently, and then here, and he's really seeing like, okay, he's growing too from his first season, telling everyone to F off. This is my science. Get the heck out of here.
You know who he reminded me in this episode of was Will Smith in the movie Hancock.
Did not see it.
I love that movie. It did not get a great critical response, but I'm a huge fan of it.
Mm-hmm.
The TLDR is that Hancock is basically like a Superman in our own real Earth, but he's also like a real mean drunk. And nobody likes working with him. And he works with a public relations guy to learn how to be better. And at one point, the cops there's a hostage situation. The cops are there. And Hancock shows up. And he says, how can I help? And the cops tell him. And Hancock goes to walk into the bank. But then he turns around and he says to the cops, by the way, good job. And like you can see, it's super awkward for him to say that. And he's making a conscious effort. He's like, oh, that's right. I need to acknowledge other people. And that's what Stamets was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. The episode was called Stormy Weather.
Yes. Did that tie into the song Zora was playing?
Yes. Because Shar, my friend, told me, apparently Trek Movie mentioned this. Get ready for this. So, shares the name of a song from 1937, and a name of a musical, same name, starring Lena Horne, who released a music album, same name, in 1957. Lena Horne is the grandmother of Star Trek Discovery executive producer Jenny Lumet. So it actually has a connection.
Wow.
Whether it's intentional or not, it's kind of neat. But I also just love this whole music popping up. Zora, it's the second time I've heard Zora loving this kind of stuff.
See, I thought the song she was singing might be coming from the musical Funny Face. Because that's what we saw in Calypso.
Uh-huh.
But I guess we don't need to go there yet.
Not yet, if we do.
Cool.
So that was kind of a neat tie-in. And then that's all I really had for the episode. We don't have much, we're getting a little long, so I wanted to briefly touch on Ready Room.
Okay.
Jonathan Frakes was talking to Will Wheaton. They did their best to stay on target instead of talking about Next Gen. But it's a really good episode if you want to see the behind-the-scenes work of what it is like to work with a director, how they see the episode. He talked about how working with Sonequa for that scene on the bridge where Sonequa was alone, going down with the ship. They had a few days to film that scene. And he talked about how he said, she's a masterful actor and I don't have to steer her. I don't need to control her performance. It's like working with Patrick. Just like the high praise of getting what he wants out of her.
That's amazing.
That was really cool. He talked about, apparently back on the set for Next Gen, and apparently it still happens now, when like you had a long day of filming and energy's down, usually Jonathan or someone breaks out into song to help bring the energy back. And he talked about how, because Will was like, I forgot about this, because apparently they would do that in Next Gen. Brent Spiner would often start it, but everyone remembers Jonathan singing apparently. Brent would go the whole thing of pretending to hold a microphone and moving an invisible cord as he's walking around the stage singing, which was fun.
So the when I mentioned earlier that I met Jonathan Frakes at Super Mega Fest, there was a Q&A, it was small audience, small room, and they say, please welcome Jonathan Frakes, and you would expect like there'd be some music playing, but this was like a really low budget event. So he just walks in and he provides his own soundtrack, and he's going da 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 da.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
He talked about the AR room, the holodeck of the Mandalorian set. He said he didn't get to work on it at all this season, but next season looks like he will.
You mean season 5 of Discovery?
He said next season.
Ha!
But he said that apparently talking to the production crew, it's a beast to learn. The actors love it. For the production crew, it's a beast of a system to learn, but the actors love it because they don't have to talk to an X on a green screen. They can actually just see what they're looking at. And for Discovery, he's actually they're told to make it more cinematic. Cinematic, yeah, thank you. To experiment with the camera because they weren't allowed to on those old shows. It's very rare you saw weird angles in Next Gen, TOS, DS9, Voyager, all those. Those were all very stationary cameras. And he talked about how the big, huge bridge set helps with that a lot. But all the steady cam of turning the camera upside down. If you look, we talked about the cinematography before, and Discovery Weight's different because they're encouraged to do it now. They're allowed to, and how they just haven't been in the past. So it's kind of neat. And apparently, a lot of the lighting that they use for filming is actually built into the set, so it's kind of neat too. I just love behind the scenes things and how it works, and so I love this. There's a spoiler for Picard, a maybe spoiler. I'm not going to say it here.
Thank you.
Will asked, like, can you say anything? I know you're working on Picard right now. Can you say anything? And Will's like, I know you can't say anything. Hold on. Will Wheaton is like, I know you can't say anything. And Frakes is like, actually, I can. I asked him what I can say. And he says, and then there's one line, is all I could share. And everyone's like, what?
Okay.
But we don't know if it's actually real or if it's even for season 2.
Well, since I don't watch Ready Room, I don't know what the spoiler is.
I'm not saying.
And I appreciate you keeping it off the air for our listeners who are like me.
Yes. And then lastly, Will mentioned Jonathan, like, yeah. They said how this Discovery cast feels a lot like them and how much of a family they are. And they talked about how some of them play D&D together. Some of them, even if they don't have the casting call to be on set that day, they'll come in if they know their friend is having a hard scene to film, just to support them. And just talk about their family. And it's just really sweet. This is a really good episode of Ready Room if you like that behind-the-scenes stuff. I highly suggest it. And if you don't mind a potential spoiler that probably won't actually be a spoiler, stomach your way through it. I highly recommend it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's all my notes. And I got through a lot. And I know we're going a little longer than the episode again.
Yeah, well, what's the point of podcasting if you don't have more to say than the show?
That's right.
Yeah. And we'll be doing this again next week in person.
Yeah, next week in person. And then we have season breaks, so we have nothing to talk about.
Well, I know you're not eager to watch more Prodigy, but if you want to watch it together, we can do that. We don't need to podcast about it.
Yeah, we'll see. But no one else can see this. When mentioning watching Prodigy, my eyes kind of went like,
Well, I'm going to watch it. And also, a very generous friend just created a profile for me on her Disney Plus account. So now I can start watching not only the Marvel movies, by which I mean TV shows, none of which I've seen. So that's WandaVision, Hawkeye, What If, lots of others, Loki, but also The Mandalorian, which I've never seen. And also, I think there's a movie about a sled dog named Togo, so I want to go see that.
Yeah. No,
and also Raya and the Last Dragon, which I actually have now already seen on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
But these are all things on Disney Plus. I've never had access. I take it back. When the pandemic first started, I signed up for 1 free week of Disney Plus. I thought I was going to watch The Mandalorian, but then I realized that they had Tron, the animated series.
So
Tron Uprising. So I had to watch Tron Uprising. That's all I could fit into a week. But I thought I canceled the auto-renewal.
Oh, no.
And I didn't find out until like 4 months later. And I didn't watch anything in those 4 months.
Oh, no.
So finally I canceled it. And apparently I only canceled the Disney Plus portion and not ESPN and Hulu.
Oh, no.
Because it was a bundle. and I didn't find that out for 4 months. So I really need to do a better job of reviewing my credit card bills line by line. Because I wasn't getting emails saying, like, you got charged again, here's another bill. Like, ugh.
And so with that knowledge, to help you on watching Star Trek this week.
Well, now I'm glad I have a profile on somebody else's account because I don't need to cancel it.
That's right.
So, until next time.
Oh, geez, I wasn't ready for this. I didn't even know it was coming. Punch it.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes and keep your hailing frequencies open by following us on Twitter @TransporterLock or subscribing to our podcast and email newsletter at transporterlock.com.